Becoming Yourself with Dr. Maev Conneely, Episode 5. This podcast brings together wisdom and tools from coaching, clinical psychology, and mental health research to help you become who you want to be. If you were to ask yourself now what you want from life and what the most important thing is in life for you, what would you answer? I think probably for a lot of people, it's something along the lines of a happy life. It's not how many houses you have or how many friends you have, how successful you are in whatever way you measure success, how you look. It's probably something about living a happy life. And the most important piece of living a happy life, I would argue, is how you relate to yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you feel about yourself. You are the constant companion that is going to be with you in your life. That's the only thing we know. And how we treat ourselves is therefore the most important relationship in our lives. So what I want to talk about today is hopefully going to be able to help you look at how you talk to yourself and how you relate to yourself and improve it. And through that, make your life happier, make the day-to-day pieces and moments that make up a life, make them happier, or at least less miserable. So the way I'm going to do that is with a big dramatic jump now, and I'm going to make my way back to this idea of how you relate to yourself. But I'm going to jump over to undergrad psychology degrees and to two theories, classical conditioning and operant conditioning. I'm going to explain what they are and then talk about how you can use these and the insights from this research to change the way you behave and the things you do and the results you get in your life, but also to change how you think and how you feel, which is the real way you make your day-to-day life happier and the way you build a happier life. So classical conditioning is basically refers to a way we learn, which was discovered by Pavlov. And it's what he found out he was researching dogs. He found that the dogs would start salivating when they heard this bell rung because they'd sort of been trained to associate those sounds. So as a sort of an accidental association can lead to a response. You get fed and you hear the bell, and eventually you hear the bell, and even if there's no food, you start salivating. And then, so that was Pavlov. And Skinner is the kind of big name in operant conditioning, which is another kind of more deliberate way of changing behavior. And what he found and showed is that you can reinforce behaviors with rewards, with positive reinforcement. So you can, if you want the dog to sit, you give them a treat, and then the behavior of sitting is reinforced positively, it's rewarded with the treat. So this basic idea has been applied to humans, and there are lots of books based on it, based on habits and habit formation and how you can change your life through changing behaviors. And so you see it all over the place. There's a book called Tiny Habits by B.J. Fogg. There's Atomic Habits. And all of them are based on this body of research that came out of operant conditioning, which is that we associate things. And ironically, because it came out of this understanding of behavior, what's often left out of the story is the reward, is the sort of the celebration of doing the thing you want to do. So the way we can apply this to changing the things you want to be doing in your life is by setting a goal, an activity you're going to do. Usually the advice in Tiny Habits by BJ Fogg is to latch it onto something that's already done. And let's say like going to the bathroom or putting the kettle on or brushing your teeth. And then you add something small to something you're already doing. And then the key thing is you celebrate it. So let's say I want to get stronger. I could decide that every time the kettle is boiling, I'll do 5 squats. And that kind of small habit, I'd start doing it. And then when I've done it, I say, oh my gosh, well done, Maev. You did the thing. That's brilliant. You might think it sounds silly to celebrate something so small, but what we know and what we see very clearly with children or with animals is that getting that positive reinforcement it's so effective. It works. The dog is much more likely to do the thing you want it to do if you say, oh, well done, give it loads of love and give it a treat. And the treat for us it can take whatever form you want. But I think an important element is the way you talk to yourself. Is you saying, oh, yeah, well done me. Like taking a moment to acknowledge your effort, to acknowledge that you did the thing you said you would do, and that you're sort of proud of yourself, even if it's proud of, doing 5 squats or something that your brain might be telling you is small or insignificant or could never matter. You might be thinking now that celebrating the small things like that, like a very small, like going on a 10-minute walk every day, or celebrating, reading for 5 minutes, that's not a good idea because you'll never go further. You'll get complacent and think, oh, that's good enough. If I'm nice to myself when I do small things, then why would I ever do big things? And it's exactly that thinking that keeps us stuck, because by celebrating the small things, it makes it so much easier to do the next big thing or to do a slightly bigger thing. If you do the squats and then kind of dismiss your effort and say, oh God, but that's only 5, you used to be able to do more, or you should be able to do more, it's going to make it much harder for you to do it the next time, because you won't have given yourself the internal celebration or the internal, at least, acknowledgement of the effort you made. So that's the kind of first level of using this theory to change your life. You need to look at what it is you want to do, make it specific, and when you take a very small step in that direction, ideally that's latched onto something you already do, you celebrate it. And just with that, you can see, honestly, enormous transformation that you might not notice how big the change is because it starts so small. But I did it with push-ups a while ago. I started out saying I'll do 2 push-ups when I brush my teeth. And then eventually, a few weeks later, I was able to do 20 push-ups in a row, which I had not at all thought was going to happen when I started. I hadn't even set that as a goal. All I decided was I'll try and do two push-ups every time I brush my teeth. And then it becomes normal. You could do this with stretching while the kettle is on. You could, it doesn't fully matter what the thing is. And I would actually encourage giving something like this a go, even if you don't particularly care about being able to do a push-up or having stronger legs and doing squats, because I think that there's something brilliant in the celebration and in the reward, in setting your mind to do something, doing it, and then saying, well done me. And then you see the change over time, how a small little change every day or a couple times a day of, a few seconds can add up to big change across your life. And it's hard to kind of get that without giving it a go. So I think that the real takeaway here is that the reward is important. Whatever that reward is, if it's, watching something, if it's texting somebody, if it's a piece of chocolate or whatever. But the real thing that has to go with whatever behavior you do is an internal sense of, yes, I did the thing, well done. That's the only essential part. And then if you add something else as well, that's up to you. This could be something you add to something as frequent or as trivial as sending an email. Like, I did that. That's great. Well done. And if you're thinking to yourself, gee, I couldn't possibly start rewarding myself or being nice to myself about writing an email, imagine how you would react to a dog that you don't know in the park. How willing you are to say, oh, hi, and pour kind of kindness and excitement and, just positive emotions on this dog that you don't know at all. And, why are we so willing to do that, for a puppy or a dog, and not for ourselves, not say, here I am, even though I've not achieved anything impressive today, all I've done is brush my teeth, done 2 squats and sent 1 email. I'm proud of that. Why can't we celebrate each of those things as, not as, and I've got a Nobel Prize, but celebrate it or acknowledge it anyway. Maybe acknowledge is the right word, to say, hey, you did that. There it is. So that's how we can, with very small incremental changes, transform whole areas of our lives in a way that you'd hardly notice. And I think that the other way, this kind of second level I promised I'd talk about, is using this learning to change how you relate to yourself and talk to yourself. So you could put the kettle on and, stretch for 20 seconds. Or you could use that as a moment to practice a habit of speaking to yourself in a new way, a way you're trying to learn. So that could be being kinder to yourself, could be not being critical, noticing if you're being critical. Notice if you're setting something up in your mind where your worth is dependent on what you've achieved that day. You can take that moment for yourself, that time, to practice a thought like an affirmation. I think affirmations work for some people and don't for others, but this kind of an affirmation could just be a statement that you say that makes you feel something you want to feel. So let's say you're trying to practice being kinder to yourself or being, more focused. You could have an affirmation that says, it's usually in the present tense, I am focused today. I am letting go of the need for perfection. I'm proud of myself. And people practice these thoughts for the version of themselves that they want to become. Say if they're starting a business, or if you want to be somebody who's, in a career that you're not in. You try to make that feel real to yourself in advance by practicing the affirmation. So that's what I'm encouraging now, is thinking of habits, not just as the behaviors we can do that add up to, dramatic transformation, being able to do physical things that you weren't able to do a few months before, just with a tiny shift and, not having to take out 20 minutes every 2 days to do a workout, just adding, a couple seconds at the end of something else that you're already doing. But to use those times not only for that type of change, but for change in how you think to yourself and how you feel about what you do. And to reward, to celebrate all of these changes, to practice the affirmation and then say, hey, well done, I did that. Mark it somehow, just a moment to yourself to pour positive regard on yourself the way you would with a puppy in the park, to congratulate yourself. And you might be thinking, God, but that's what I meant to do. I meant to just be sending the email. I meant to just get on with things. Why should I mark it in any way or celebrate it? And I guess there's a kind of an answer that's very pragmatic, is that you will then do more of this thing you want yourself to do. It is just, we just know that it works. That's how all of the kind of parenting books are written, and the dog training books, and managers, kind of managing big teams of people, leaders. Positive reinforcement works. So that's one reason. And the other reason is that the moments of your life, changing those and having moments of kind of kindness and pride or satisfaction in having done things that you set yourself to do, that will build up to making your life filled with more positive emotion, with more kindness. It will ultimately build up to you having a happier life, to being happier. And if you think about the opposite, let's say, I notice this in kind of, once you start noticing, you see it everywhere. But if I cook the dinner and my partner says, oh my gosh, this is so yummy, thank you so much, this is so exciting, this is so delicious, and it's so lovely that you put this effort in, blah blah blah, it makes me feel good. I've gotten all of this kind of approval, and I've gotten a reward, I've gotten a celebration of my effort, and it makes it much more likely that I'll want to do that again, and much more. And the opposite, of course, if I made the dinner and the effort wasn't acknowledged, and either my partner or me kind of shrugged and said, oh, well, you're supposed to cook the dinner, that's what you do, very quickly I would not look forward to making meals. I probably would do it less. Actually, definitely would do it less. So I think that there's a sort of a very kind of almost calculating way to look at this, is that it will work. But also, once you start getting into the habit of being kinder to yourself and rewarding and celebrating things that you do, it will become more normal, and that will start becoming the way you relate to yourself and to the people around you. So you can use the knowledge from operant conditioning to teach yourself new tricks, the way that we teach dogs tricks. And the other massive change that this will have is it'll make you a companion to yourself. The only constant companion you have is yourself. And what this will do is change that relationship to a supporting one, to a person who's rooting for you. Imagine facing all of the challenges of life with somebody on your side that isn't going to tear you down and point out the errors and say that you should have done more, or should have done it quicker, or you should have been different, but who's there saying, look, you did that, well done. Somebody who's on your side and rooting for you. That's what will make a happy life. So just to summarize, what I've talked about is operant conditioning, and how if we want to change our lives, we change the things we do regularly. You can attach new habits to the things you do regularly, like brushing your teeth, or going to work, or coming home from work. And the things that these new habits could be behaviors, but they could also be sentences you say in your mind, sentences that you want to practice, a thought that the person you want to be would think. And whether it's a behavior or an internal sentence you say to yourself, the key is to celebrate doing the new thing. So if you read an affirmation out loud, like I am letting go of the need to be perfect, or I'm worthy just the way I am, I'm good enough the way I am. When you say that out loud, you then have to reward yourself for making the time to do that. Saying, well done. Felt a bit silly and awkward and I didn't want to do it and I didn't think it would matter, but I did it. Another kind of just side point on the self-worth point there. I think a lot of us have this idea of kind of producing being a necessary prerequisite to having self-worth, that we can't be proud of ourselves, we can't be pleased with our day's work unless we've produced something, whether that's, doing work or getting through our to-do lists of errands. But that is an assumption that we don't have to have. You don't have to, let's say, like Cara Lowenthal says this on her podcast. When we look at a newborn baby, we don't see it and think, well, it's only worthy if it sleeps through the night or if it, eats 5 times a day. It's just inherently worthy for existing. And it's deserving of love and affection and care just for existing, even if it's crying, even if it's, not sleeping through the night. It just is in of itself worthy. At some stage, that sort of changes for some reason. A confusing shift happens where we start seeing our own worth as related to what we're doing and how good we're being at being a human being. It's a complicated, impossible equation in our brains. What if we saw ourselves like a newborn baby as fully worthy, that's the baseline? We don't have to kind of start at -5 every day, and then once we've, taken the bins out and done 6 hours of work or whatever thing it is you believe is necessary for you to be worthy, like whatever thing that is, that only once we've done that you kind of work your way up to zero worthiness or to baseline. What if you completely now decided that you were always enough? And that doesn't mean, you might be thinking, oh, but if I thought that, I'll stop striving, I'll stop trying. I'm not saying, you're enough and so you never have to try anything ever again, but that is allowed. It isn't a kind of truth of the universe that we have to be, as tired as possible, as productive as possible, as rich. They're all optional beliefs and goals. And if you recognize that they're properly optional, that you don't have to be productive all the time, that's just one of the ways of living life, and you could decide that, this kind of vague sense of being productive and being busy is good. You could decide that that's how you want to live your life, but you don't have to. I have to at some point do another podcast about the idea of productivity and how kind of wild it is, this sort of need we have to kind of be doing things, and often we sort of forget or lose sight of the end goal of what we're trying to produce. We just want to feel like we're doing a lot, so we're running around doing unnecessary things for the feeling of productivity rather than for the end goal of producing something that we want and that is high quality or that matters to us, is aligned with what we want for our lives. But anyway, that's a whole other topic. I guess what I was just saying there is a sort of question this idea that your self-worth might be dependent on what you do. In the same way you could just pour love and affection and excitement and joy on a stranger's dog in the park. Could you do that with yourself? Could you have even, 10% of that positive regard and kindness and celebration of yourself? Like when you send an email, could you take a moment and say, hey, I did that. Well done me. it's interesting that it's so much easier for us to say, oh, good boy, brilliant dog, wonderful, aren't you great, than it is to say that to ourselves, or to say even something much more tempered to ourselves, like, yeah, you did the work well, you did all right, or even acknowledging that we did the work, often because we see it as what we have to do, and the assumed kind of, well, that's your job, that's what you have to do. And so we skip the taking satisfaction and pride and joy and giving ourselves that reward. So yes, don't skip those moments of being pleased with yourself, because they build up to a whole life, and they will lead you to doing more of the things that you want to be doing. Thank you so much for listening. If you've listened this far, I am very grateful, and I would be even more grateful if you rate the podcast. And you could also leave a review, but rating takes no time at all, and it would help me enormously. So if you want to give me a gift, you can do that. I would be so grateful. All right. Tune in next time for maybe something about productivity.